50,000. Well, that's what he said. Okay. March 9th, 1940. You fought well, but you're slowly being defeated. You ask the enemy for an armistice while negotiating peace terms. This week, the enemy says no. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week, Adolf Hitler gave new orders for his spring offensive in the west. The main force will attack through the Ardennes. To the northeast in Finland, the Finns are now pulling back to their rear defense line. They have been negotiating peace with the invading Soviets, but stopped when French Prime Minister Edouard Daladier said he would send 50,000 troops by the end of March if the Finns keep resisting. The British clarify what the French said this week. The 50,000 are to be the total soldiers in the whole campaign, not the French Expeditionary Force, and only the first wave, some 12,000 men, could arrive before mid-April. Daladier's contemptible little gesture had wasted 5 days and cost the lives of thousands on both sides. There's actually a lot of he said, she said going on here. And Daladier and Neville Chamberlain, British Prime Minister, will say as late as next week that they're just waiting for the official Finnish request, and they'll send the troops. But as Eloise Engel points out, only a token force would actually reach Finland, and the rest will remain to secure Norwegian and Swedish positions from the Germans. If the Finns accepted Western aid and turned down Moscow's offer of a settlement, the entire Scandinavian peninsula would become a major theater in the nearly global war, with Germany possibly entering on the side of Russia. A totally different world situation would develop, with a Nazi-Soviet alliance against a Western front extending from the Arctic Circle to the Mediterranean and beyond. But again, 12,000 men arriving in mid-April is not likely going to be of any help. On the 6th, Finland sends a peace delegation to Moscow. Risto Ryti and company arrive the 7th. Soviets refuse any armistice, though, until the final agreement is signed. When the negotiations open March the 8th, the Finns discover there is no such thing. There are two choices: sign or keep fighting. That's it. Joseph Stalin does not even bother turning up. And the terms? You'll find out next week. This week, the fighting in the field is still very much going on. The Gulf of Viipuri had never figured in pre-war planning by the Finnish army. The islands that screened Viipuri from the sea were fortified, but not against an over-the-ice offensive from the Finnish coast. Under ordinary wintertime conditions, the ice over the Gulf would have become too unstable and too dotted with thin spots to support heavy vehicle traffic. But this year, it remained frozen. General Winter had turned traitor. Well, yes and no. The Soviets can attack the coastline, but only after they make it past the islands. And there are Finnish garrisons on dozens of them, and they delay and delay the Soviets, and every hour of that means an hour beefing up the defenses in Viipuri. Interesting, though, to think why the Finns are even defending Viipuri and the rear line. I mean, to the west are lakes that funnel an invader into pretty decent defensive ground. Why not pull back there? Well, Viipuri is kind of the only bargaining chip the Finns still have at the negotiating table. And what if the Finns can hold out long enough for spring, maybe an early spring to arrive? The Gulf and lakes will thaw, and the ground before Viipuri will turn into a swamp that no armor or artillery can cross, and the Russian drive will stall. And by now, a lot of volunteers have arrived, and more would likely come. 8,000 Swedes and some 700 Norwegians have taken over the Sala sector, releasing the experienced Finns there to redeploy on the coast. The Russians also know all this, hence their determination in attacking the rear line this week. And the fighting for the Gulf grows throughout the week until it matches the carnage of mid-February at Soma. By the 5th, there are 30 Soviet divisions and over 1,000 tanks and 1,000 aircraft attacking the rear line and the coast. Soon, the Soviets have a small beachhead, and if they can expand it, there is basically nothing between them and Helsinki. By the 6th, fighting has reached the suburbs of Viipuri, and Second Corps are down to around 600 shells, all calibers together. By the 8th, the Russian beachhead has indeed expanded, and they are shelling the Viipuri-Helsinki highway. If they can occupy that road, they can cut off Second Corps and surround Viipuri. They've also managed to destroy Finnish radio communication, so the Finnish units are now fighting their own battles as the week comes to an end. They might be unwillingly decentralizing, but someone is very much centralizing. At the end of February, Dr. Fritz Todt was chosen to centralize the direction of all the new German labor for military production. The occupants of the conquered territory, Czechs, Poles, and more, will be assigned to various munitions factories around the Reich. The Todt organization will be the largest single employer in Germany and will send men and women all over to wherever any shortages or bottlenecks pop up in production. Todt will also work with economizing of any raw materials in short supply. That is really necessary because Germany does not have either the fuel or the raw materials for an extended campaign. Consequently, there are many army officers that are seriously worried that the planned offensive in Western Europe will lead to a stalemate Germany cannot possibly overcome. Well, Hitler has basically said, "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead." Okay, he did not actually say this, but he did decide to go ahead and use up all resources and raw materials without any consideration of future consequences, figuring that they can be replenished from industrial regions of France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Of course, for reasons we've discussed several times before, Hitler has postponed his offensive plans again and again, but the last postponement in mid-January accidentally gave him a little stroke of luck. When the Allies thought the invasion was about to come, their forces in northern France were sent to the border to where they would begin to defend Belgium, which gave away their basic plans. The Germans had then rethunk, and Erich von Manstein had come up with his Ardennes plan that I talked about last week. And the Allies are really being lulled into a false sense of security, too. A lot of officers and war planners think Hitler is not really going to attack France. But before he does any such thing, he is going to attack Norway and Denmark. He issued orders for preparations last week and now on the 7th signs the directive. The attack will require all German surface ships. The German army and the Luftwaffe are skeptical of this. I mean, they have their hands full planning for France, but Hitler has word of the British concentrating forces in Scapa Flow and presumes this is in preparation for a Norwegian landing. His own plans are rolling along. You gotta realize that the smaller nations of Europe do not want any part of this war. I mean, most of them did not want to be associated with Germany because that would be basically associating yourself with German hegemony. But for the most part, they don't really want to be associated with the Allies either. Max Hastings points out that just looking back at history, that opens you to the horrors of war for not very much gain. And anyhow, Finland and Poland have shown that the Allies can't or won't do too much to help the chosen victims. Nobody wants to be Hitler's or Stalin's next chosen victim, so people are taking great pains to avoid provoking them. The Norwegians are in general more worried about British designs on their coastline than German ones. On the 4th, though, the British abandoned Fort Stratford, their invasion plan. So the German plans are going ahead, and there are currently no British or French prospects or plans for actually making war occurring. Well, Martin Gilbert writes that Britain isn't really able to take any initiative. A secret report on the 8th from the Chiefs of Staff revealed that of 352 AA guns supposed to go to the BEF in France, only 152 have arrived. Of 48 light AA guns needed by the Advanced Air Striking Force, not one has arrived. And of the 1,860 anti-aircraft guns considered the minimum for the defense of Britain, just over 100 are in place. These are concentrated near places like naval bases or radar stations, so things like munition plants and heavy industry are unprotected. They are still doing nothing more than dropping millions of leaflets over Germany. On the 9th, an angry Englishman writes into Time and Tide, Finland is in extremis. Poland's death rattle echoes across Europe. In both cases, lack of air power has been the decisive factor. There are doubtless many good reasons why we have been powerless to help, but is that a reason for adding mockery to impotence? If petrol and pilots are not to be lightly risked even for vital objects, what is the excuse for sending machines 1,400 miles across enemy country to drop leaflets? Well, it is an attempt to effect a war without fighting in the field. That is also happening in China. Wang Jingwei is still getting his Chinese nationalist government set up in Nanjing, though it is in many ways a puppet state and will make loads of concessions to the Japanese, including stationing Japanese troops and advisors all over China. And it's not affiliated with the Nationalist Army and its leader Chiang Kai-shek. Also, though Japan will recognize it, they have no plans to send an ambassador, which would mean formal recognition. This is because what they really want is some sort of understanding with Chiang Kai-shek. So what the Japanese call Operation Kiri and the Chinese Operation Tong is sort of the strategy of dealing with both. This week on the 7th, the Japanese meet with Chiang through intermediaries on Hong Kong. Chiang seems interested in peace, and his army is in a perilous state. But this interest may well be a hoax designed to further delegitimize Wang. In any case, talks fall through, and China remains as isolated, and in Chiang's case defiant, as ever. And the week ends with the Finns defending their rear line and the Soviets refusing to stop attacking until their terms are met, the Germans consolidating to make war, and the British abandoning their own plans. Daladier wasn't just being a jerk with his empty promise to the Finns. He had kind of hitched his government's wagon to a really unpopular war. And if he could frame it as an anti-Bolshevik crusade, he could win over the French right. But anyhow, here's the situation. The Soviets have attacked the Finns. The Swedes have said no to sending military help. The Allies have promised military help that turns out to be a hypocritical ruse in order to use them. The one big country in Northern Europe that has not treated the Finns abysmally is Nazi Germany. If you want to understand more about the threat that Russia posed to the independence of the nations of Eastern and Northeastern Europe, have a look at our Between Two Wars episode about the Russian Civil War right here. Our Time Ghost Army member of the week is Colin Kelly. His monetary contribution helps make sure we can continue bringing you this series. Join him and join us in the Time Ghost Army at Patreon or at timeghost.tv. See you next time.